Natalie Wood was PlMPED out by her crazy mom to Hollywood elite. They said she was America's sweetheart, but behind the lights, her own mother sold her childhood to Hollywood's predators. This isn't fame, it's a nightmare wrapped in glitter. Natalie Wood, born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in 1938, came into a world her mother had already imagined for her, a world built on dreams, ambition, and escape. Her mother, Maria Zakharenko, a Russian immigrant who had fled hardship, saw America as a new beginning, and her daughter as the key to that new life. Maria wasn't just determined, she was relentless. She believed Natalie was destined for greatness, and she made sure everyone around her believed it too. From the moment Natalie could walk, her mother guided her toward the spotlight, convinced it was her fate. By the age of 4, Natalie was already performing in front of cameras, reciting lines, and learning how to smile on cue. Her mother was always nearby, coaching, directing, shaping every moment. To Natalie, it wasn't play, it was purpose. The message was clear. Perfection meant safety, success meant survival. In 1947, at just 8 years old, Natalie starred in Miracle on 34th Street, one of Hollywood's most iconic films. The world saw a bright-eyed little girl who made them believe in magic again. But off-screen, Natalie was learning something else, how to hide fear behind a flawless smile. Her mother reminded her constantly, this was destiny. It wasn't about joy, it was about proving something. That they belonged, that the dream was worth it. For Maria, fame wasn't luxury, it was validation. Hollywood didn't just discover Natalie Wood, Maria built her. And what she built was more than a performer, it was a brand. Behind the glamour of 1940s Hollywood, the champagne, the red carpets, the flashbulbs, there was a machine, a system that demanded everything from those who entered it, especially from the young. Maria understood that world and played it with precision. Her focus was singular, to make sure Natalie stood out among countless faces. Every meeting, every introduction, every public appearance was a step in the plan, to ensure Natalie's name was remembered. Some who knew Maria described her as a strategist, a woman whose ambition often eclipsed caution. She pushed Natalie to appear older, wiser, more polished, not out of malice, but out of belief that presentation was everything. In that world, image could open doors faster than talent alone. For Natalie, it meant growing up quickly, learning to navigate rooms filled with power and pressure. At 15, she was already seasoned in the ways of Hollywood, a place where opportunity and danger often blurred together. Her mother stood close, not as a protector, but as a guide who refused to let go. Those who watched their relationship unfold saw both love and control, a partnership built on shared dreams and silent costs. Every success was Maria's triumph, every stumble her fear, and as Natalie rose higher, her life would soon cross paths with one of the most influential entertainers of the era, Frank Sinatra. By the time Natalie Wood was in her mid-teens, she was already one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, beautiful, talented, and dangerously young in a world run by men who thought power could buy anything. And standing at the center of that world was Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a singer, he was the singer. By the early 1950s, he was a god in show business, a voice that could melt hearts and a name that could open every door in Hollywood. But Sinatra also had a reputation, women, parties, and a temper that could light up a room or destroy it. Rumors began swirling that Sinatra had taken a special interest in Natalie, who at the time was only 15 or 16. To the public, it looked like a mentorship. Behind closed doors, it was something else entirely. According to George Jacobs, Sinatra's personal valet for many years and author of Mr. S., My Life with Frank Sinatra, Sinatra's fascination with Natalie went back disturbingly far, to when she was only 9 years old. Jacobs claimed that Sinatra often talked about her, called her the little girl with grown-up eyes, and that her mother, Maria Zakharenko, didn't just tolerate his attention, she encouraged it. Maria saw Sinatra as the ultimate key to Hollywood power. He knew everyone, controlled everything, and carried a kind of untouchable energy. For a mother obsessed with fame, that kind of connection was irresistible. Jacobs wrote that one evening, Maria brought young Natalie to a party wearing a tight black dress, makeup too heavy for her age, and hair styled like a grown woman. People were uncomfortable, but Maria didn't care. She reportedly introduced Natalie to Sinatra as if she were presenting a prize, saying something like, "She's ready for her big moment." The story gets darker. Soon after, Natalie was invited to Sinatra's house under the pretense of singing lessons and mentorship. But what really happened there has haunted Hollywood whispers for decades. Witnesses claimed Sinatra would flirt openly, calling her baby and darling as if she were his latest conquest, not a teenage girl. And Maria? She said nothing. She believed this was how the business worked, that fame required sacrifice, no matter how horrifying that sacrifice might be. One chilling anecdote claims Sinatra once joked to Natalie, "I don't want you to testify." It wasn't just a joke, it was a confession, the kind that tells you everyone involved knew exactly how wrong it all was. Natalie was trapped in a nightmare disguised as opportunity. She wanted to act, to be taken seriously, to rise beyond the child star label. But the only doors that opened were through men who viewed her as a possession, not a person. Her mother handed her to power, and power devoured her innocence. At 16, Natalie Wood thought she'd finally found her chance to prove herself, not as a child, not as someone's puppet, but as an actress. That chance came in 1955 with Rebel Without a Cause. The movie would go on to define a generation and destroy her innocence all over again. The film's director, Nicholas Ray, was 42 years old, a Hollywood veteran known for his genius behind the camera and his chaos off it. He lived inside a bungalow on the Warner Brothers lot, a space filled with cigarette smoke, whiskey bottles, and late-night visitors. And according to several accounts, that's where Natalie met him, not as an actress auditioning for a part, but as a young girl desperate to be seen as mature enough for the role. She wasn't even old enough to drive. But Nicholas Ray didn't see a child. He saw vulnerability, and he took advantage of it. People who worked on the set later recalled that Ray seemed obsessed with Natalie. He called her at all hours. He invited her to his bungalow under the excuse of rehearsals. And soon, those meetings stopped being about acting. Natalie's mother, Maria, knew what was happening and didn't stop it. Because the role meant everything. If Natalie got it, she'd finally be seen as a real actress, not just a former child star. For Maria, that mattered more than her daughter's safety. And so, Natalie went to Ray's bungalow, and not long after, she got the part. She was cast as Judy, the lonely teenage girl searching for love in a world that didn't understand her, a role that mirrored her real life almost too perfectly. Her co-star, James Dean, became the symbol of youth rebellion, but Natalie became the symbol of something far darker, the cost of being young and female in a predatory industry. The film was a massive success. Critics praised her emotional depth, calling her performance raw, real, and beyond her years. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, why it felt that real. After the film's release, James Dean died in a car crash, sealing the movie in tragedy. Natalie's performance was immortalized, but so was her pain. Years later, she would admit in an interview, "Until then, I did what I was told." It was a quiet confession, one that revealed everything without saying much at all. She wasn't rebelling, she was surviving, and Hollywood applauded her for it. By the late 1950s, Natalie Wood was everywhere: magazine covers, premieres, the red carpet darling who could shift from heartbreak to humor in a single frame. She was no longer the child star from Miracle on 34th Street or the fragile teen from Rebel Without a Cause. She was Hollywood royalty, but royalty with invisible chains. Between 1960 and 1965, she delivered performance after performance that critics called electric. In West Side Story, 1961, she became Maria, the star-crossed lover caught between two worlds. The movie broke records, won Oscars, and turned her into the symbol of cinematic innocence, yet behind the camera, she was fighting to be taken seriously. She couldn't even sing her own songs, her voice was dubbed. It was the perfect metaphor for her life. Everyone heard her, but no one was really listening. Then came Splendor in the Grass, 1961, where she played Deanie Loomis, a young woman crushed by desire and repression. Opposite her was rising actor Warren Beatty, intense, magnetic, and difficult. The chemistry between them was real, so was the emotional damage the role demanded. Natalie later admitted that filming it nearly broke her. Audiences saw a woman unraveling on screen, but they didn't realize she was unraveling off it too. 2 more Academy Award nominations followed: for Love with the Proper Stranger, 1963, with Steve McQueen, and Inside Daisy Clover, 1965. Every nomination felt like proof that she mattered, but also a reminder that she could never stop proving it. Hollywood didn't nurture its women, it consumed them until they disappeared. Between takes, Natalie wrote in her journal about loneliness, about feeling surrounded but unseen. She was adored by millions, yet she walked through studios like a ghost who smiled on cue. She tried to reinvent herself with lighter films, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, 1969, embracing the new, open-minded era of the late 60s. But the press only cared about her love life, her clothes, her parties. They didn't want Natalie the artist, they wanted Natalie the fantasy. And slowly, the same system that had built her began to squeeze her out. You could feel her slipping from the spotlight, not because her talent faded, but because Hollywood was done with women who dared to age, think, or feel too much. Behind the glamour, she was fighting to hold on, not to fame, but to herself. Amid all the chaos, Natalie Wood still believed in love, maybe because she never truly had control over it. Her heart had been scripted since childhood, and the first man to step into that script was Robert Wagner. Wagner was handsome, polished, and already a rising star when Natalie met him. She was just a teenager, but she told her mother at 10 years old, "I'm going to marry him someday." It sounded like a dream, and at 18, she made it real. In December 1957, their wedding was the event of the year. Glossy photos, diamond smiles, the perfect Hollywood couple. To fans, it looked like a fairy tale. To Natalie, it was a chance to finally live a life that belonged to her. But fairy tales fade fast under studio lights. 2 careers, 2 egos, and 100 tabloid headlines turned love into performance. Both were ambitious, both constantly working, and the cameras never stopped following them. Behind closed doors, fights erupted, jealousy brewed, and the same pressure that once made Natalie shine began to crush her. By 1962, the marriage was over. The divorce devastated her, not because she lost Robert, but because she lost the illusion that love could save her from Hollywood's emptiness. Years later, she met Richard Gregson, a British writer-producer, quieter, intellectual, the opposite of everything she'd known. He seemed safe, normal. They married in 1969, and for a while, Natalie looked genuinely happy. In 1970, she gave birth to Natasha Gregson, her first daughter. Motherhood changed her. For the first time, she was the protector, not the protected. But even that peace cracked. By 1972, the marriage fell apart amid rumors of betrayal and emotional distance. Another dream gone. And then, fate circled back. In that same year, Natalie and Robert Wagner found each other again. Older now, humbled by pain, they rebuilt what once fell apart. Friends called it Hollywood's Great Reunion. To outsiders, it looked romantic. To insiders, it looked complicated. A love bound by history, guilt, and ghosts neither of them could escape. In 1974, they had a daughter, Courtney Wagner, completing the picture of domestic bliss. But something in Natalie's eyes had changed. She smiled for photos, yes, but it was a smile that knew too much. She'd been the child star, the Hollywood darling, the perfect wife, and she was still searching for the woman underneath all that. Those who knew her say she was finally planning to step away from acting, maybe even to direct or write. She wanted a quieter life, a real one. But Hollywood doesn't let go easily. Neither does the past. Because just a few years later, a weekend trip with Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken would end with Natalie Wood's body floating in the dark waters off Catalina Island. And a mystery that still chills Hollywood to this day. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. Thanksgiving, 1981. Natalie Wood, now 43, was finally living what looked like a calm, beautiful life. 2 daughters, a husband she had loved since she was a teenager, and a career she was ready to reshape. She invited her co-star from Brainstorm, Christopher Walken, to join her and Robert Wagner on their yacht, the Splendor, off the coast of Catalina Island. A small group, just friends. A quiet weekend away from the noise of Hollywood. But what happened that night, November 28th, would turn into one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in Hollywood history. According to the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern, the atmosphere started friendly. There was laughter, champagne, music. But as the night grew colder, the tone changed. Tension simmered between Wagner and Walken. Jealousy, ego, maybe something darker. Wagner later said they argued about Natalie's career, about her spending too much time with Walken on set. Others believe it was more personal. Davern would later describe hearing shouting, glasses breaking, furniture moving. He said Wagner's voice was sharp, angry, like something had snapped. At around 11 p.m., Natalie was seen leaving the main cabin. She was wearing a red down jacket, light, not meant for the cold ocean air. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. At 1:30 a.m., Wagner told Davern that Natalie was missing. Her small inflatable dinghy, the Valiant, was also gone. The Coast Guard was called hours later, and just after dawn, the unthinkable, Natalie's body was found floating face down in the dark water, less than a mile from the yacht. Her legs were bruised, her arms scratched, her face pale from the cold Pacific. She had been gone for hours. The official story? Accidental drowning. They said she'd tried to untie the dinghy after hearing it bang against the side of the boat, slipped, fell into the water, and couldn't get back out. But for many, that explanation made no sense. Natalie had a lifelong fear of deep water, so deep that friends said she wouldn't even take baths alone. And that red jacket she wore? It was so heavy, it would have pulled her under instantly. The bruises, the timing, the silence that followed. It didn't add up. In later years, Dennis Davern, the yacht captain, changed his story. He claimed Wagner had been furious that night. He claimed there was yelling, breaking glass, and then silence. He said Wagner delayed calling for help hours after Natalie vanished. He told investigators if he had called sooner, she might still be alive. In 2011, 30 years after her death, the case was officially reopened. The coroner changed the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest. He denied any involvement. To this day, he has never been charged. And so, one of Hollywood's most beautiful stars, a woman who lived her life under a spotlight, died surrounded by shadows. Her final moments, still lost somewhere between truth and silence. When Natalie Wood died, Hollywood didn't just lose a star, it lost its reflection. She embodied everything the industry pretended to celebrate: beauty, talent, grace, but underneath, she revealed everything it truly was: a machine that devours what it creates. Her funeral drew hundreds of stars: Frank Sinatra, Elizabeth Taylor, Gregory Peck, Fred Astaire, all standing in silence as her casket was lowered. They called her timeless, but the truth was, time had run out long before that night on the yacht. Her daughters, Natasha Gregson Wagner and Courtney Wagner, grew up carrying not just her name, but her mystery. Natasha, in particular, became a quiet advocate for her mother's legacy, producing documentaries and speaking openly about the pain of not knowing what really happened. She said once, "People want answers, but I just want peace." That peace never came. Every few years, new reports, new witnesses, new revelations reignite the question: what really happened to Natalie Wood? Was it an accident? Was it jealousy? Was it something darker, covered up by power and time? Forensic experts still argue about the bruises on her body, whether they came from the fall or from someone's hands. Journalists still chase leads that lead nowhere, and Robert Wagner, now in his 90s, still refuses to talk about that night in detail. Hollywood has changed since then, or at least it claims to, but Natalie's story remains a haunting reminder of what fame costs, especially for women who rise too high, too young, and too fast. She began as a child promised to the world. She ended as a mystery the world could never solve. And somewhere out there, in the cold Pacific water off Catalina Island, lies the silence that only she could explain. Natalie Wood wasn't just a Hollywood star. She was Hollywood's secret, the one it could never bury deep enough.
If you enjoyed this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really makes us smile. And if you're hungry for more fascinating tales, check out the 2 videos right below. You might just discover your next favorite story.